Welcome to all of the folks that are just joining now. We're so glad that you're here. We're just going to jump in right away today. I know there'll probably be some questions, and we're really excited to hear from both of our speakers today. So I want to first just welcome everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to our Wisconsin Women in Conservation Summer Camp webinar on bats. We are very, very glad that you are here with us today. My name is Kirsten Slaughter, and I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator for WWIC, the Wisconsin Women in Conservation. And I also work for Wisconsin Farmers Union. We have a number of other WWIC team members on the call today. So for those of you that are on, if you want to give a little wave to folks to let them know who you are. So we are doing this as a lunch series and know that people are eating lunch, and we welcome and invite you to continue eating your lunch. So please feel free to eat your lunch during this time. We're going to start today with a quick introduction of WWIC, the Wisconsin Women in Conservation Project, and some of our upcoming events. And then we'll be hearing from our two lovely content experts. And after that, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So we're going to go right ahead, and I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Kivrist, who will be leading us on an overview of WWIC.
Hey, thanks, Kirsten. Hello, everybody, and welcome. If you are new to WWIC, if this is your first event you've attended, a special welcome. And if you are returning, again, a special welcome, and great to see you again. I'm going to chat just real quick about some little background on WWIC and some of the great events we have coming up. So hopefully folks, all right, so Wisconsin Women in Conservation, we are a NRCS project heading into the third year, and are a partnership project between four great nonprofits: Marble Seed, Michael Field Agricultural Institute, Renewing the Countryside, Wisconsin Farmers Union, and have come together. And this is a really unique effort. This is really one of the first in the country, if not the only one in the country, where NRCS has a specific project just to do outreach to women landowners, women in conservation in the state. And we're real proud of all that we've created together. So we work with women farmers, women non-operators, in the sense that maybe you own some land, but you don't live there, beginning farmers, conservationists, those looking for land. Our tent is very wide and inclusive intentionally. So we particularly focus on safe spaces to share our stories and connect. And for that, I really encourage you to attend one of our in-person events. I'll talk about those in a second. And they're all at our main website, wwic.org. So we basically work in different regions in Wisconsin. We have 6 tri-county clusters right now. That's where the events are. But again, anyone is welcome anywhere. And when I was mentioning proud of what we've done, we've had some great results of over 2,500 women like yourselves have been engaged in anything from webinars to events to reading the newsletter. If you're new to WWIC and this is your first event, you will receive that beautiful newsletter and more info to come. We also work directly with women, particularly in the tri-county regions, on developing conservation plans and have a bunch of events. We've done some things already this year with spring learning circles. We just wrapped up some educator happy hours in July. We've got a field day coming up. This is one of the last summer field days on August 22nd in Burlington in the Southeast region. So check that out. And then coming up, and you'll see these on the main event page, we have fall learning circles throughout the state. And then something very special coming up, we have been working on for you what we're calling our lookbook. It's a compilation of our stories and work and inspiration from women across the state. And this is going to be a special party in October. We'll have these copies available for you. So stay tuned for more on that. And then also helping on the resource realm of, we have conservation coaches that come to our events and chat one-on-one, and again, the conservation plans. And if you're interested in one of those, please give a shout out in the chat or email us at info@wwic.org, and we are happy to see what we can do to connect you on that, to learn more about the land you're on. We also have a listserv, WWIC, info@wwic.org, which if you're interested in joining that, just send an email to info@wwic. That is our exchange of information and things that are constantly going on that we love to have. We've got a great group of expert educators on there, so it's a great place to ask questions, share other events and information, etc. And I wanted to end on we have an event coming up on the 15th of September. It is a regional summit in southern Wisconsin, and we'll stick the link in the chat. That is going to be a really cool day-long special one-time event. We're working with Bonnie McKeeran with the Menominee Tribe, who's coming in to do a tea-making workshop. We have farm tours, rainfall simulators, and my favorite part, a dessert buffet, as well as lunches included. So that's in the southern part of the state. Brooklyn is about 20 minutes south of Madison. So we'll get that out to you. And thanks again, Heather and Marcy, for sharing with us today.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And now I am very excited to introduce Heather, who will be our first speaker. And as I'm introducing, we have a short little poll that we wanted to share with you. I'm going to launch that. If you could answer that question as I do the introduction, we'd really appreciate it. So I'm very pleased to introduce our content expert, Heather Caraca. Thank you so much for being here with us, and we're very excited to hear from you. Heather grew up in the Wisconsin Driftless region and gained a lot of love for the natural world from her parents. After graduating from UW-Madison in conservation biology, Heather began her career with Wisconsin DNR, working with Dave Rydell and Paul White on the Wisconsin Bat Program, where she spent the next decade coordinating volunteers in the Summer Roost Monitoring Project, crawling around underground in winter and chasing bats on the summer landscape. In 2019, she completed a master's degree from UW-Madison Forest and Wildlife Ecology Program, where she investigated summer habitat for northern long-eared bats and eastern pipistrelles. Heather continues to be a WDNR conservation biologist with the Wisconsin Bat Program. Thank you very much, Heather. I am going to share our poll results so that people can see. And then I'm going to turn it over to Heather. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks for having me, everybody. So yeah, I'm Heather. I work with the Wisconsin DNR in the Bureau of Natural Heritage Conservation. I'm a conservation biologist with the Bureau. So today I'm going to talk about bats of Wisconsin. I'll give you a little bit of precursor about bats and their biology, how we know about bats in Wisconsin, some of the threats and what we do as the bat program in helping their recovery, as well as how you can help. So just as a little background about bats, bats are not rodents. They're actually members of their own order, Chiroptera, which means hand wing. So this little fellow in the picture here has really long fingers, and then his wing membranes extend between his fingers. So that's where the term hand wing comes from. This is actually out of date. There's over 1,400 species now. They keep finding new ones, mostly in the tropics. They have a really wide range of diets, right? So bats eat insects, they eat scorpions, frogs, fish. There's fish-eating bats, and obviously there's vampire bats. There's 3 species of vampire bats who do consume blood. You could probably name something that's smaller than a bat, and there's a bat that eats it, fruit. The bats are kind of split up into Megachiroptera and Microchiroptera. So Megachiroptera are the big, flying foxes, the old world fruit-eating bats. And then the Microchiroptera are the new world, are insectivorous bats, among other species. So why we should save bats? So bats are really important pollinators and seed dispersers of a lot of the foods that we eat every day. So bananas, mangoes, figs. If you drink tequila and enjoy tequila, you should thank bats because they pollinate the agave plant, which produces where we get tequila and mezcal. They act as really important pest control, not only for human pests, they consume mosquitoes, but they also eat lots of forestry and agricultural pests as well. So studies that have estimated that bats can save farmers millions to billions of dollars each year in North America in the form of pest control, actually consuming them, as well as preventing having to spray so frequently. They produce guano, which on the outset doesn't seem like a really great thing, but the guano is really high in nitrogen, especially insectivorous bats, so it's really great fertilizer. So it's frequently mined, just like bird guano. People will go into caves and mine it out to produce fertilizer. if you think about a cave environment too, it's usually one or two entrances. They're kind of small, and there's not a lot of influx of organic material into cave systems. So bats are one of the only ways that, like, you know, they consume insects outside, they come inside, and then they poop. And so it's one of the only ways that there's organic material that's brought into these closed sites. And bats are really susceptible to decline. They're long lived for their size. If you think about a bat, you know, little brown bat, that's about the size of a mouse. A mouse lives maybe 1 to 2 years if it's lucky. Little brown bats can live 15 to 20 years. We have a record of a male little brown bat who lived over 30 years in Wisconsin. They're also slow to reproduce. So they generally reproducing just 1 or 2 young a year. And all that means is that, like, if there's declines in these populations, they're really slow to recover, if at all. So I just wanted to touch a little base on some specifics for pest control in Wisconsin, a kind of a case study. So Dr. Amy Ray did her PhD on bats, little brown bats and big brown bats. So she went out and collected guano from underneath these bat houses and in barns of both of these species, and she would take the guano back to her lab. She would do genetics on it and identify the insects that these bats were eating. So she began sampling in 2015, and you'll hear from somebody who was a part of the study. Marcy was a part of the study. So Amy collected guano weekly for several years and looking at the shift in diets of bats in response to declines from white nose syndrome, but also just diet composition in general. So she found that bats are not only eating several species of mosquitoes, including the ones that carry West Nile, but they also eat a variety of insect pests for agriculture. So of the samples that she was taking, you know, almost half of the little brown samples had you know, various pest species in them, and then, you know, a third of the big brown bat sample. So examples included cutworms, leaf rollers, plant bugs, and then some invasive species as well. So Drosophila and Japanese beetles. So they're good to have around. Bats are good. Just the species we have in Wisconsin, we have 8, 4 of which are migratory bats. The eastern red, silver-haired bat, hoary bat, and evening bat are all species that are here, residents in summer, and then they'll leave, just like birds, in winter, you know, starting in the fall, and they'll go overwinter somewhere where it's a little bit warmer. And then we have 4 cave or hibernating species of bats. So little brown, big brown, northern long-eared bat, and tricolored bats are also called eastern pipistrelles. The northern long-eared bat is a federally endangered species, and then they're also looking at, the Fish and Wildlife is looking at listing the tricolored bat because of impacts from white nose syndrome. So in Wisconsin, a yearly bat life cycle consists of a series of movements and residency. So if we start right now in August, in the fall through October, bats are actually dispersing from their summer sites. They're headed to either caves and mines to swarm and mate, or they're heading out of the state. They're migrating south. And they pretty much, as soon as the juveniles were able to fly, they were dispersing. So this is a picture of Dave Riddell, who's at one of our big hibernation sites during fall swarm. And so they do this amazing behavior. They're active all night, and they're mating, and they're, you know, communicating that this is a hibernation site, like you should come hibernate with me. They'll go into hibernation, or they will have left the state November through about April, sometimes into May. So the females they mate in the fall, and they actually delay fertilization or ovulation. And so they store the sperm until they emerge in spring. And then she ovulates, and then she becomes pregnant. Gestation is about 60 days in bats in Wisconsin. So, you know, they emerge in the spring, April through May, and then they start to give birth in early June. We like to say the first week of June is kind of the birth date for bats in Wisconsin. And at these, where they're giving birth is these summer roost sites, and oftentimes they're bat houses or they're barns or they're attics. And the little brown bats and big brown bats in particular can form some pretty big colonies. to raise their young. And this is also when they're out foraging and eating all those insect pests. So the tree bats quickly, again, roost in trees in summer. They migrate south for the winter. They're generally large and brightly colored bats. This is a silver-haired bat here. And then our cave bats or our hibernating bats are, again, the ones that hibernate. Some species, again, roost in large colonies in summer and winter. And they're often using these artificial roosts. But they also use trees. All of our bats will use trees as roost sites in summer. They tend to be a little bit smaller. So these are little brown bats right here. Bats face a host of issues that have been causing declines in population, but the major force at play right now is something called white nose syndrome. So white nose is a fungal disease of hibernating bats that causes mass mortality in infected sites. And you can see this fellow here has the fuzzy growth on its muzzle, and that's where the disease gets its name. But the fungus can also grow on its ears and its wings, basically anywhere where there's not fur. So the disease was first found and identified in New York in 2006, and it's since spread to 40 states, which might be out of date even now, and 10 Canadian provinces. So you can see by the map here, this is the spread map. Started in New York and quickly spread down the Appalachians and over the Great Lakes. And so it kind of pinched us, and then it's just steadily spread west. It reached Wisconsin in 2014. And we've seen declines in hibernation sites by as much as 99%. Almost, there are some sites that don't have any bats left hibernating in them because of white nose syndrome. So researchers associate white nose syndrome with the relatively newly identified fungus Pseudogymnoascus destructans. This fungus really thrives in cold and humid conditions, which are characteristic of caves and mines used by bats. So it affects hibernating bats, and unfortunately more than half of the 47 species in the United States and Canada hibernate to survive winter. So this estimate of 6 million bats, is obviously out of date. It's really hard to know exactly how many bats have died, but it's likely, millions. The main transmission for the fungus is bat to bat. Bats are really social, they're really mobile. But the fungus can actually survive in the sediment and soil of these caves and mines. So unfortunately, once a site is infected, it's never going to be uninfected. Like, it's impossible to clean these sites of the fungus. And then that also means that humans are a potential, transport of the fungus too. If you're crawling around in a muddy cave and you don't wash your gear off, you can accidentally potentially transfer it that way. But the main transmission is definitely bat to bat. So cave and mine hibernating bats are vulnerable for various reasons. One of them is that they cluster. They like to huddle together like these little brown bats here, and that can promote transmission. Hibernation sites, there's relatively few of them in the region, and they often serve these big areas. The bats from all over, the states and even the region will come from the summer landscape and hibernate in these few suitable sites. They have limited energy resources during hibernation. They shut down everything, their heart rate, their metabolism, everything is slowed so they can, go into torpor and survive. It also means they're immunosuppressed, right? They have no way to fight off an infection while they're in torpor and in hibernation. And there's often, multiple species in hibernation sites. So they're in contact, they're next to each other, or they're flying around each other. So the disease, unfortunately, isn't species specific. It can affect anybody who's hibernating underground. White nose syndrome first arrived again in 2014, and we saw some pretty significant declines in the following years. It was usually the disease would arrive into sites, and then within 2 years, we saw these huge declines. So almost 80% declines in monitored summer little brown colonies, and then 70 to 90, and like I said, sometimes they're completely eradicated in winter colonies. But by year 4, we were starting to see stabilization in these little brown sites. So you can see the top plot here is growth rate. So that's how the population changed year to year. And basically, the thing to note here is that above 0, this dashed line, is increasing populations, and below that is decreasing populations, right? So before the disease got here, which is year 0, things were relatively stable. We saw these huge declines, and then things have started to slowly creep back up and stabilize again. So we see this recovery at Little Brown sites, but it definitely varies from site to site. Not all summer sites are created equal, just like not all winter sites are created equal. But unfortunately, this only seems to be true for little brown bats and big brown bats. We continue to see declines in northern long-eared bats and tricolored bats. So the plot on the bottom here is actually our ground zero, the first site where we found white nose syndrome. So you can see, oh, no, this is not ground zero, but basically this is just showing that, 120 to basically, 0 or just a few individuals over time. So how do we know about cave bats and that they're experiencing these significant declines, and how do we know that they're actually stabilizing now? We use multiple techniques to monitor bats in Wisconsin. We actually go underground. We'll go underground in winter and survey bats. So we can use these hibernation surveys to monitor population levels, right? We'll go on and count every single one of these little bats on the ceiling and walls. So this is a big site in Pierce County, and like these dark brown spots are either clusters or singles of little brown bats. And so we'll go underground and literally count them to get a census of how many were there, and how many are there now. So again, we were able to collect this baseline data about where bats were hibernating, how many before the disease got here. And then we also use it as a method of surveillance, right? It's pretty obvious when the bat's infected. It's got this white fungal growth, but we'll also take swabs and other samples to determine, how much of the fungus is actually there and on these bats. In summer, though, bats are, in Wisconsin are out eating those insects. They're helping to maintain their fast metabolisms, and they use echolocation to navigate and capture prey. Their echolocation is an ultrasound. It's above human hearing, so you can't hear it when they're just flying around, typically. But we use these special bat detectors, we call them. So they're they're ultrasound detectors that record all ultrasound, and then as you're using it, it'll divide the sound so you can actually hear it as they're flying around. And then we get a sonogram, and just like you can identify a cardinal versus a chickadee based on their call, we can identify this eastern red bat here versus a little brown bat based on what their, the shape of their calls and what frequency they are. And so we can use this to identify species distribution and relative abundance of bats on the summer landscape. It's been a really useful tool. The project that I coordinate, though, is summer roost monitoring. So volunteers and landowners conduct emergence counts and acoustic surveys. And so we have some pretty incredible information on bats in Wisconsin. So just as a refresher, right, so some species roost in bat houses and buildings, and it makes them pretty obvious. And so volunteers and landowners will go out and count the bats as they emerge at dusk, and we've gotten some really amazing population estimates for where these bats are and how many. And I just wanted to share this. Hopefully this works. This is Trempealeau National Wildlife Refuge has a big bat condo, and you can see on the right here, hopefully, these little bats dropping out. And so that's what we see when we go out and do an emergence survey. We're literally out there with our clicker counters, watching them and clicking every time we see a bat emerge. So these risk counts and the fact that we have data from pre-white nose, during invasion and post-white nose, has given us a really big leg up on what colonies were like before the disease got here and what happened as white nose invaded. So this is Trempealeau National Wildlife Refuge. We coordinate 2 counts over the course of the summer, one in June before the pups are able to fly, and then in July after the pups are able to fly. So you can see the peak, the high count for Trempealeau was about 1,700 bats, and then white nose arrived, and the colony crashed pretty much to just a few hundred bats. And then now it's kind of, it's stabilized and even increasing. And so I don't have a count yet for 2013, but I'm anticipating that we'll reach, 1,400, 1,500 bats with the count in July. Hopefully, if somebody did. So this kind of shows this is a trend, right? Like it's not the same in every case in every roost site, but it's definitely what we see. We see stable population levels, a crash, and then at least stabilization, if not some increases. And the bottom one here is again Trempealeau, but it's the thermal camera, the footage that I just showed you. Those cameras turn on. That camera turns on every night and records the bats as they emerge, so we can get daily counts. And this kind of just shows you just how much variation there can be in daily counts, right? So something happened here in mid-June, maybe it was a weather event, or maybe they were all giving birth or something like that. But the point of this is that there's kind of stable numbers until early to mid-July, and then the pups start flying, the juveniles start flying, and you see this increase in the number of bats that are counted. So folks who participate in the Roost Monitoring Project, we have a lot of them, over 230 volunteers and landowners conduct surveys. They send me the data and I organize it and try and produce, something that's meaningful to folks so they know that their data is being used and it's really informative for us. It's really helpful for us. So this is an infographic that I produce in conjunction with a Roost Monitoring report that folks can take a look at when they after they've done a season of bat monitoring. So both roost and acoustic surveys have been really critical for understanding white nose syndrome dynamics in bat populations in Wisconsin. And really the only reason that we have data from across the state for so many years, and in the places, and we're in the place that we are today with understanding impacts from white nose syndrome is thanks to citizen scientists and their contributions. So if you have a bat house, or if you know of a barn or somewhere, you are certainly welcome to monitor it, and I'll take the data. You can work with me, or depending on your location, if you're really interested in it, you don't know if you have bats, or don't think you can contact me, and I might be able to find you a public property where you can go and watch bats emerge. So I just wanted to touch on this. How do you know if you have bats, and how do you get bats if you want them? Usually there's like ample evidence of a roost site because of the guano, right? They're out there eating a lot, and they're also pooping a lot. So there's usually piles of guano, or there's guano spread out throughout a building or something like that. But we do have reported small colonies and solitary bats that use buildings and other nooks and crannies. For example, my dad has a bat house that has one big brown, and he counts it, every summer. It's the same big brown. So those tiny roosts do exist, and we definitely want to know about it. But you can also watch buildings at sunset and see if you see them emerge. They're also really chatty. If you sit at a bat house or a roost site at sunset, you'll hear them like talking to each other, and that can be a good indication. You can borrow a bat detector and walk around your property and see who's flying, see if there's like a lot of activity at a certain building. If you want to get bats, one of the best ways to do that is to build a bat house. We have plans on the DNR website. There's also plans for bat houses in places like Bat Conservation International. They have a bat house handbook. But just quickly for bat houses, there's no this perfect place or perfect build of a bat house. But we do have some general guidelines when you're mounting a bat house, and that's to put it at least 10 feet off the ground. They have they need a drop zone. They can't straight fly out of a roost or straight fly in. So they have to drop out and then they swoop back in. So they need some space underneath them. They're also really vulnerable when they drop out. So cats and owls can predate them, as they're emerging. Don't put it on a tree. We suggest either putting it on a pole like these bat houses here, or on the side of a building. Trees are generally a little bit too much shade and too easy access for predators like raccoons. Place it where it'll get some sun. The bats like it warm generally. So facing it east or southeast is a really great direction, because the morning sun will help the bat house heat up. In the morning, it'll retain the heat throughout the day and even into the evening. And it can help buffer helping it heat up in the morning can help buffer some temperature swings that can happen, day to night. Placing it away from nearby trees, but also not too far away, because like I said, they're most vulnerable when they first emerge. So if you place it, 10 to, or maybe more like 15 to 20 feet away from like a woods edge, they tend to feel a little bit more comfortable using the bat houses, because if they have a predator, or if it's particularly windy or something like that, they have that woods edge to duck along and use to get some cover. And then place it away from disturbance, right? You don't want to put it above your door that you're using every day, or right next to your fire pit or something like that, because that's not a very great place for them, right? They're going to feel too disturbed, and they probably won't use it. So anyway, that's what I had. I'm happy to answer questions. And I think the link for the BAT program is being put up, but if you search for Wisconsin BAT program online, you can certainly find it that way.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was really great. There's some great questions in the chat. Please continue to put them there. I'm going to turn it over to Marcy, and then we're going to ask all of the questions at the end collectively. So I am very pleased to introduce at this time Marcy Hess, who is our citizen scientist for today. Marcy has 60 acres that she is restoring with her husband, Jim. These include prairie, woods, and oak savanna, and grade from dry soils to wet mesic soils. Their land is managed for biodiversity, and she maintains detailed inventories of wildlife enjoying their restoration. Coupled with this, Marcy encourages restoration work in unproductive parts of family farms and has found ecosystem processes, birds, and insects as her favorite subjects. And I will turn it over to Marcy.
Hi, everybody. So, I don't remember. I was trying to think of when did I begin working with bats as a citizen scientist, and I don't remember, but I think it has got to be going on 25 years or more. So I've seen a lot happen in those years. But just like Heather has her citizen scientists, I have my helpers. My 3 little kitties let me know that we had a bat in our fireplace once. This was during, clearly in the summertime, so there was no fire on. But I don't know how long it would have taken had we not had the kitties to let us know. So we got the little guy out with one of Jim's fishing nets and turned him loose, and he's all happy. So these are our bat houses. We have 4 of them. Interestingly, one of them is one that Heather made. I got it as a door prize. So that's a fun fact, that we put 2 on this facing south and 2 facing north. Is at the time we put these up, we were told that having that option, particularly when they were having babies, gave them the option for temperature. If the south-facing one got too warm, they could move to the north. I don't know if that still applies or not. So far, we, at the height of bats, we had about 120 in our 4 houses. And now at the last count, we had 0. So they haven't come back after white nose. And then here's a picture of Jim. He's doing the count. We have these clickers, and I know you can't see me because I'm now on the screen. But we have these. He's got a clicker in his hand here, and you count them as they swoop down, like Heather had talked about. They drop down, and then as they come out, you click, click, click. And I remember many times you had clickers in both hands, particularly when we were at Yellowstone, and we were just click, 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 clicking. So I hope to get back to that. This is a different location around the Yellowstone area where we've helped with bat houses and bat counts. Toward the end, after we feel like we've gotten most of the bats counted, we will get a flashlight and look up under there to see who we missed so we can add them to our counts. So that's what Jim is doing here. Then we had another part of our experience was having a filmmaker come out. And she talked about, she was doing one called Night Watchers. And so she filmed us counting the bats, and then she came back and on side to filmed me photographing insects. All of this at night. That was interesting and fun to do. And then for 2 years, I believe this was in 2017 and 2018, we helped over at Lake Yellowstone folks that were banding the bats. And this is where they were setting up the mist nets. And I don't know if I can point, but those 3 black things at the top are the bat houses. And the mist net is that piece with the white, like a drainage thing. It's a soft white fabric drainage where if the bats could, if they don't stick to the net, they would fall down in it. We put the tarp behind it so that it would distract them from flying that way, because we wanted them to fly into the mist nets. And I believe at the time we were doing this, we were trying to see how many of them were had white nose at one time, or how many of them were free of that. And so part of what I did was work with the actual banding of them. And we would swab their noses, and we would swab along the veins, the top vein of their wings. And then we put this band on there. And of course, when I first started, I'm like, oh my gosh, isn't that going to squeeze that little vein or that bone and break it? But the band is curved so that it doesn't even affect it when you pinch it tight. And then the last part of my journey with the citizen scientists, I know I'm going to be really brief with this, so I take questions. It was helping Dr. Amy Ray and with her studies on what the bats were eating. We had identified several sites around the county, around generally just fairly close to where we are. And she would set up this solar panel, and then the solar panel, which you can see, and then the little device next to it, off to the left, is a bucket trap. And in that was the solar panel lit a solar light. I'm sorry, it's a black light. Lit the black light, and then there was a funnel, because all the insects would be attracted to that. And it would funnel down, and then we had a way to capture them inside the bucket. And that way they identified them to the family level. At this point was my understanding, to see what they were eating in these areas. The other cool thing about this photo, you see on the very right side, this is where we were doing our restoration work, and all of that part is cleared. And then you see from the left over what we have left to do. And that's the edge of our property. So I always have to point that out. And the last fun thing I got to do, this is not a photo I took, but this is a pipistrelle bat. And Heather had heard that there were some bats nesting. And if I remember right, there were spruce trees, which was unusual. And I'm not sure that they are normally found around this area. So she hollers at Gemini and she said, hey, you want to come over here and see this? And well, yeah. And they had one of their bat boxes, and I got to hold it and hear their little squeaks as they came out. I mean, it was like, oh my God, it's to die for experience. It's something that you just have to do. So if you have an opportunity to get one of those bat boxes and hear something you would never ever get to hear, do it. Our counts at Yellowstone, just kind of briefly, because that's where I work mostly. In the height of it, I think the highest count was in 2012, which was about 4,000 bats. And it dropped way down in 2017 to 660 and started coming back up. 2022, we had 900 and some. And if I remember right, this year, our count was close to 2,000. So I'm happy that they are surviving. That was one of the things we learned while we were tagging them too, banding them, is that they were surviving. Some of those bats did have the fungus on them, residuals.
Thank you, Marcy. That was really great.